I do have a lot to say, but maybe I'll leave Hayden to edit this part out. There's a lot of things I want to say that I absolutely do not want to put on a podcast.
I think DeFi is like this major resurgent category.
It is all part of like step one of many towards a post-dollar future.
I mean, my God, like I think it's just going to be an absolutely incredible alt season that we just really haven't even seen begin yet. Like I'm super bullish. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the DeFi Podcast. We've got the full crew here today. Rhett, JF, and Jared are all here, and there's a lot to unpack. Let's get right into it and start with ETH Denver. So ETH Denver, which is one of the biggest crypto events every year, held last week. In past years, it's been absolutely packed. I can attest to from personal experience. Sometimes it's hard to get a rental car or an Uber in Denver around the time of that conference. But I didn't go this year, and I did hear, like on crypto Twitter and from friends, that the attendance seemed kind of lackluster this year. But Rhett, you were there all last week, going to a ton of different events. Would love to hear from you what your experience was like. You know, which events did you attend? What kind of stood out to you? Have you gone in previous years? Like, how does it feel versus previous years, et cetera?
Yeah, sure. So I've been to ETH Denver for 4 years in a row now. I think this was the lowest attendance ETH Denver, although 4 years ago they did it at this like much smaller venue and it was like way overcrowded and stuff. So it's like hard to get a sense of like comparative attendance there. But like the last 3 years it's been at this like Cow Palace. And yeah, I think it's still a really well attended event, but definitely lower attendance than in the past. I think a little less hypey as well. So last year, for instance, there was a ton of attention around restaking. And there's like this whole side of like restaking summit where all of the LRTs and Eigenlayer and all of the AVSs were speaking, and it was just like huge. It was like just that side event was like practically as big as like a whole conference. That stuff is, now. Like there's not as much like hype around it, et cetera. And it's just like, I think people are still building in that category, but it's, there wasn't like a particular category that people were just like going crazy over. I thought it was still a really good event. I stopped by the main event like for a few hours one day, but I mostly did side events and kind of one-on-ones. My sense, one of the things that I've gotten a sense of is like, it feels like crypto is professionalizing a little bit more. A lot of projects are getting like more mature. A lot of the people you're talking to are more like professional types, asset managers and RIAs and things. And a lot of like more mature teams that have been building for a while and have, more refined products. So that's my general vibe. It's pretty positive overall. Met some really awesome people. But yeah, definitely significantly less attended, still jam packed. Like you go around the venue and you're going to get caught in traffic and stuff, but it's, I don't know the numbers, but my guess is attendance was down by 30+%.
Gotcha. The side events that you went to, were there any that kind of stuck out to you as being like a little bit more energy? Like I'll give you an example. Last year, this wasn't ETH Denver, it was another conference. It was Consensus in Austin or something. But I remember last year, every event I went to, there'd be 200-300 seats and basically 20 of them would be full, except for Solana events. And Solana events, like every seat was packed. And you could tell like that was where the energy was around this time last year. Did you get a sense like that at any of these side events? Like, was there any that kind of stuck out that seemed to have like more developer or user attention?
None of them were like thousands of people. I did focus more of my time on like one-on-one connections. But I did go to a few, like, I went to some like AI related talks. There was a kind of an AI chain that I stopped by and listened to a couple of a talk by their founder and a panel. And it was like, it was like a small venue, but well attended. So like completely full, but like we're talking, small venue. They had kind of an interesting view and approach to like more like the data side of AI agents and things. I think so I think that category has like more attention now than it did before. But it's not as hypey. I didn't get the sense it was as hypey as like you might think it would be. The AI agent stuff, at least at the conference. And then, I mostly just met up kind of one-on-one with great builders, and there's tons of great builders there.
You're wearing a Linea shirt right now. Like, dude, every time you come to the podcast, you have a different shirt on. So I imagine that last week you collected 20 more different shirts for you. Or are these random shirts that you pick up and you don't, or did you actually make some connections with the Linea team over there?
It's funny. So I did meet the Linea team actually. So for whatever reason, I mostly wear swag now. And this I got last year at ETH Denver. I met up with the Linea team yesterday, but I didn't get new swag. And when I walked around the venue, I was like kind of on the hunt for some new t-shirts, but like I usually look for like DeFi projects to get t-shirts from. This is an L2 rather than a DeFi project, but most of what I have is like from DeFi projects, but there weren't really any DeFi booths. It was mostly like chains or infra or things like that. And so I only got one shirt and it was from ETH Denver itself. So this one was from
what's your read on the sort of lack of attendance of DeFi projects?
A lot of the DeFi projects attended but didn't have booths. My guess is probably a lot of DeFi projects don't think booths are high ROI, and I think there's probably some truth there. Uniswap had a huge booth, but they have their own chain now, and it was really focused on the Unichain. They're on L2. So yeah, lots were there, just didn't get booths. And whereas in previous years, definitely more had booths. DeFi is I think DeFi is like this major resurgent category. If you look at total value locked in DeFi, it's been on the strong incline. Lots of really solid projects maturing, really good ones that are up and coming, et cetera. But if you talk about like all of the biggest DeFi projects, I don't think any of them feel like they need to have a booth. Like Aave not like I need a booth to let people know what DeFi lending is now. So I just think that
not necessarily like a bearish sign
these days. No.
Yeah, it might actually be a bullish sign that like these projects are evolving and they're doing, ROI calculations. We're not in this like effervescent stage where people are just spending on anything. They're spending on things that matter because they kind of are starting to understand their own business, right?
Yeah, and Aave always throws a rave they call Rave. I think they did that again at this conference. I never go to it, but like that's just a party that they like to throw. And then like booths and things. I think most teams are like, if we're decently well known, that's not a place where you really connect with users in a big way. Probably that's the sense I got. Like I met with a bunch of DeFi builders and none of them were like bearish or down on things, et cetera. It's just like, no, I just want to meet up with people that I am connecting with rather than, go host a booth.
Okay. So it sounds like the Ethereum conference was exactly what we thought it was from our impressions on crypto Twitter, which is like a lower attendance, but mostly builders. So maybe it's a good thing. I don't know. But, Ethereum sentiment is still down bad because we're lower than, 50% from the all-time highs still. So maybe, Rhett, can we get your take on the drama that's unfolding with the Ethereum Foundation over the last month or two? I really hadn't heard about it myself. I'm not an Ethereum OG, so I'd love to get a little bit more of your thoughts.
I would love to share. So I think one thing that's a general rule in crypto is sentiment follows price. So often people will get upset about things or think, a team's behaving badly or whatever, just because, price is down and they're frustrated. I think there's definitely some of that with ETH where how the foundation operates is like a place where people are expressing some frustration, partly just because price is down, I think, especially down compared to Solana, which was pretty surprising to a lot of people, I think. And there's been this kind of general sentiment by some that like, Vitalik needs to be more of a wartime leader. He needs to be out there bull posting, and he needs to be, arguing with people on the internet, like kind of like Anatoly is like well known for this, for being like really more like aggressively pushing Solana, etc. Vitalik is a different kind of person. Like he's kind of like, the chief like mad scientist sort of person I think of. Like he obviously is the founder of Ethereum and has a major role in the Ethereum Foundation, but I think he wants to spend a lot of his time thinking about hard problems and writing about it on his blog and things like that, and not in there like shilling Ethereum. And I think that's kind of a good role for him. Now, he hasn't been the head of the EF, but he basically decides who is. And there's been this frustration by some that the woman who's been the head of the EF for like the last 7 years or so, a lot of people have never even heard of her. She kind of is also kind of a little bit in the background. She also isn't like this aggressive, like we're here to win sort of thing. And so there's some people in Ethereum that are like, hey, the Ethereum Foundation needs to get more aggressively like trying to win. And I think there's a little bit of interesting, like important history to think about, where Ethereum was kind of the first of the L1s to go this route where you raise money, you have a foundation, and you're pushing for these things, where before it was just Bitcoin that was just launched and then people just come and get involved. And Ethereum, compared to others, has been ultra focused on credible neutrality. So they don't want to pick a lot of winners and losers. They up until like this year, they've refused to even stake their ETH, because if there was a contentious hard fork, they don't want to participate, and they wouldn't even put their ETH in any kind of DeFi protocols, because they don't want to contribute like to some winner take all or whatever. Now, just like in the last year, they finally decided to start depositing their ETH in different DeFi protocols, and they say they're probably going to do some staking as well. So there's been some movement there. I've heard, and I don't know if it's true, that they also were being investigated by the SEC. So I think there's probably like some like, hey, we need to like not do anything that would get us in trouble sort of thing. And so there was probably some things there. I think the general sentiment by almost everyone, though, is like, we're in a new era. ETH is definitely not a security. We have a more crypto-friendly government now, and SEC now, et cetera, and it's time to get more aggressive. So there's been some movement. Like I said, they're actually using some of their assets in DeFi. And then the question is, like, what's the path forward? So what ended up happening is a lot of people were pushing this guy named Danny Ryan to be the new head of the EF. He had been at the Ethereum Foundation before, and people thought that he would be more of like a more kind of aggressive leader, the kind of leader, like a good like wartime leader or whatever. So there's some discussion around that for a while. And what ended up happening was they did replace the head of the EF with like a dual head. I'm forgetting the names. I'll pull them. One was like the head of Nethermind, and I'm forgetting the other. They're people that aren't like super well known, and they're more like kind of like longtime builder researchers. So it is a certain personality type that Ethereum focuses on as far as those. Danny Ryan went to this group called Etherealize, which is a separate foundation that's focused on pushing institutional adoption for Ethereum. Most people in the Ethereum community are really excited about that. Like, oh, he's a great leader. That's a really important role. And so he and this guy named Vivek will be kind of pushing that on the institutional side. And so a lot of people are happy to see him there. And then the other thing as far as drama is concerned is the Ethereum Foundation also put out this tweet that it listed like somewhere between like 10 and 20 people who are on this like kind of external advisory board sort of thing from the community. And there's a lot of pushback on that, because the people on the advisory board, like even really deep Ethereum people, hadn't heard of most of them. And the way that it was phrased was like, oh, they're adding to the Infinite Garden or whatever, and it was just kind of like a little bit unclear what the point is and stuff. And so I don't have a strong opinion about that about a lot of this actually, but there was some frustration there by actually some of the biggest builders in Ethereum. Like I think Hayden from Uniswap tweeted and criticized it. But I think the general view
kind of a
is
bit aggressive for Hayden. I was very surprised.
Yeah, he doesn't tend to criticize Ethereum like that. So, but yeah, I think generally speaking, Ethereum has from its beginning had like a more a less like foundation focused chain. Like it's the Ethereum Foundation has been kind of more of a background organization compared to some of the other foundations. And I think some people think that's a good thing, that they're like more credibly neutral than many, and that's a positive thing to kind of be in the background and just do research and do upgrades and et cetera. And then some are like, no, you got to be in it to win it, and you need to be like aggressively pushing this stuff and accelerating your engineering timelines and out there bull posting and arguing with people and things. And I personally, I can see like wisdom in both approaches. So
it's fascinating Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I don't have a super strong opinion on it. It's like, Ethereum is one of those chains that at this point is mature enough that there's like lots of different orgs that contribute to its success. And the Ethereum Foundation should try to be as efficient of an org as possible. And if they choose to say, hey, we're going to try and be a really efficient org and spend our money really well, but we're still going to be in the background and we're mostly going to do research and then upgrade the chain, twice a year, then I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. But like, I can also see the viewpoint of, no, they should also be like, more aggressively shielding the chain. I'm kind of like, I'm a little bit like, I'd be fine with them going in either direction sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a weird spot they're in, right? Because like everyone who's involved in crypto has bags, and they want there to be a strong leader to work hard, to make smart decisions and pump their bags, basically. Like they want someone to create the meme coin casino that attracts a bunch of volume to Sol. They want Coinbase as a basically like a driving force behind making Base the popular chain that does well, right? So, but then if you do that, it's like, is it actually, how decentralized is it? Like, I don't know if you guys saw the news about North Korea moving a lot of the assets that they stole from Bybit onto Thor chain. And then a bunch of the validators basically quitting because they're like, look, I'm not going to be involved in essentially laundering this money. Like, with Ethereum, like there was some talk actually after the thing, after the hack about, hey, let's roll back the chain. We did it once during the DAO hack. And I'm like, dude, like they're not going to roll back ETH. Like if there's one chain that they're not going to do that, one smart contract chain where that's not going to happen, it's ETH. So I don't know. It's like this weird balance, right?
I found that to be I thought that was kind of a funny discussion because all the people saying, oh, ETH is talking about rolling back the chain were mostly Bitcoin maximalists that were like concern trolling. And then no one in the ETH community and no one at the EF was saying, let's roll back the chain. But it was like some
even
Bitcoin
if they wanted to,
like, they have to roll back the chain.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the time that Binance got hacked and, the heads of the 3 or 4 largest exchanges were actively opening the conversation to consider whether or not they should roll back the Bitcoin chain. I just find it. This was 2 or 3 years ago when Binance got hacked, and CZ was going on Twitter saying like, "Hey guys, we should consider whether or not this is like something that we should do, and just like hard fork the official Bitcoin chain from this point." Obviously, it didn't get off the ground, but the fact that this keeps coming up as a topic of discussion is concerning, because eventually if enough of these issues happen and people start getting, more lenient to the idea that they should be doing a chain rollback, I think that's the day that whatever chain that is, or the legitimacy of a large section of the crypto market, essentially loses its legitimacy. Because, if you do a rollback, I think you've lost a large portion of legitimacy.
Yeah, I think the likelihood of rollbacks on most chains is pretty low. Like, there was a big push. So one of the founders of Ethereum, what is his name? Just slipped my Gavin. Gavin Wood, founder of Polkadot, was one of the co-founders of Ethereum. He is like creator of Solidity, and he's the one who first implemented Ethereum. He was also the founder of Parity. They were building one of the Ethereum clients. They raised a bunch of ETH for their ongoing development, and one of their devs accidentally lost all their ETH. And it was like, I think it was like 600,000 ETH or something. Like, we're talking a lot of ETH. And Gavin, one of the founders of Ethereum, and it was still in the earlier days of Ethereum, was like, let's do a rollback and let us, like, we know, everyone knows this is our ETH. It's in this dead wallet. Everyone knows it's ours. Let us like free it up. Even that didn't get through. And then he kind of basically said, okay, then I'm done. So Parity's, he moved on and worked on Polkadot, and that ETH is gone forever. So the fact that didn't even get through, and that was years ago when we were less decentralized, it was a smaller community, and he was a big part of the, like, I just think the likelihood any of these ever happen is so low and like getting lower. And the fact that some people bring it up, I think it was mostly Bitcoin maximalist concern trolling. In this case, no one in the Ethereum community was talking about rolling back the chain. I haven't seen any of the other major chains talk about that either. I could see a chain if they like came out like up front and said, hey, we actually are going to be a different kind of chain that will like censor certain things or whatever, that maybe a certain type of user would want to be on such a chain for certain purposes. But you'd want that stated up front, and you would want like a clearly laid out process for making a chain like modification or whatever. I think most of these base layers, people don't want that, and it's not going to happen, and they're too decentralized for any of that to happen anyway. So I'm not that concerned about ETH or AVAX or Solana or Bitcoin, any of them really doing censorship or rollbacks.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, when these guys steal $1.5 billion, and these guys from North Korea, they really know what they're doing. Like, just they are not bridging to chains that are easy to turn off. So I kind of feel like maybe it's a bit of a moot point. I mean, with Thorchain, I guess there was a chance they could have frozen some of the assets, but anyway, most of it, like, they're going to be very careful about and stay on only the most reliable chains that can't be rolled back. Okay, so let's
Thorchain probably could have. They had very few validators, but what really made Thorchain look weird was some of them were out there celebrating that it was like, oh, our biggest volume day ever, and everyone's like, why do you think that is? Because North Korea is laundering their money through you. That's like not something to celebrate. And then a bunch of people
product
are like,
market fit,
and they
awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
PMF must be celebrated.
It's actually kind of scary.
Thorchain also is in a. Thorchain's actually a really interesting experiment, I think, for a number of reasons that I won't maybe get into today. But like, they've also been kind of a distressed project because they were mostly a DEX for a long time, and then they launched like this lending market thing, and that they took on a bunch of bad debt and things, and so there's already been some distress there, and a lot of them are probably like, hey, look, this is like, breathing new life into our project that is like, we have this bad debt to deal with. But then it created some weird contention, and then a bunch of people left. I think they have very few validators left. So those validators could have easily gotten together and censored transactions. Whether or not that's the right thing to do, I'm not going to opine.
Yeah, I worry about it a little bit as an Avalanche validator. Like, what happens if North Korea put all the funds on Avalanche and started doing stuff with it? I'm like, what's the right thing to do? I don't know. But anyway, let's move on. Okay, so enough about Ethereum. Hope price action turns positive for the sake of our bags. But let's move on. Let's take a little bit of a departure from crypto in some sense and talk about macro a little bit. So, stock market, like S&P in the US is down something like 7% from the highs, and there's a lot of anxiety about the potential for tariffs to impact the economy and risk assets, and therefore crypto. But one of the most interesting things to watch right now is like the potential tariffs with Canada. There's definitely some back and forth between the two governments and companies like pulling stuff off the shelves, et cetera. But we do have two Canadians on the show. So we'd love to get a little bit of a take on like, what's the sentiment like in Canada? I mean, I'll tell you, in the US, we basically think like it's much ado about nothing. Like the tariffs won't actually go through, at least with Canada, like they'll work something out. But how do you guys feel? What's the sentiment like in Canada?
I mean, I work in crypto, so I don't really care.
You work in crypto, so you don't have to care.
That's true.
It's like your escape from Canada. I think it's funny. I don't know if this is like official, but I saw right before the show on Twitter that it looks like Mexico is going to have pause on the tariffs, but Canada doesn't look like it for the next month. Which is a pretty funny outcome that I don't think anyone expected. It was sort of like the inverse expectation, but Trudeau is just fumbling it as he sort of does. I think actually I'll do a quick screen share. So this is a pretty dire and interesting chart. And I've seen it a number of times, and it just compares the U.S. economy to the Canadian economy since 2015. Can you guess what happened in
2008? Yeah. But what happened in 2015? Was it Trudeau elected? Is that what happened? Mm-hmm. Oh my God, really? Dear Lord.
Yeah. Justin Trudeau's background, besides being someone's kid, was actually being a high school drama teacher, and then he became prime minister and started acting out. I guess he went from teacher to actor full time, and it's just like completely, not qualified for the role. It's just what I think it comes down to. We've heard him say stuff in the past like, "I don't care. I don't care about inflation." I mean, that was followed by like, "I care about families," and but like, I think there is no understanding of how an economy works. He's never built anything, and Canadians just keep voting for him.
Why though?
So
why?
Good question, Jared. You want to splice into this conversation? I feel like you have a lot to say here.
I think there are. Oh man, nah, I can't do it.
Too professional.
Give us something.
Too professional. I mean, okay, so it's like you already said. It's obvious that like when you look at the result, Trudeau has been a terrible leader, quote unquote, for this country. But in reality, it's like, what did you think was going to happen when you bring somebody in who's going to put in, raise taxes, put in carbon taxes, raise the cost of gas, and then kneecap all of the most productive industries in Canada, right? Like, we have the potential for a significant, top 5 or top 10 in the world oil and gas industry, but it's basically just lackluster because carbon taxes, insane approval times and regulatory nonsense for what should be one of the most, insanely productive industries that this country could have is just, completely kneecapped from the get-go. So there's a lot of, social, I guess you could call them just like socialist policies in Canada that, we have things like, universal healthcare and all these different, just different like social support systems that cost a lot of money. And if you want to have those things, continue on into the future and not degrade into semi-worthlessness like they are now, you need very profitable industries if you're going to tax them heavily to, float those things and their long-term existence. Like if you don't have very profitable industries, you're not going to have the ability to pay for extremely expensive social programs. And, that's a decision that Canada has made for quite a while. People seem to be okay with doing that, but then, you can't turn around and say like, well, we're going to tax people at, nearly a 50% tax rate and then have carbon taxes and then have like a 15%, sales tax when you actually go to use the money that you've already been taxed on. It gets to the level of absurdity. And the last thing I'll say is that like this becomes just, obvious to see when you see that like businesses, entrepreneurs, professionals have all moved over to the States. And so all of the potential productiveness that Canada could have had has just left the country because we don't have a like a good environment for business to happen. So people just say, well, instead of starting a business here, I'll go start a business in the US and I'm going to be 30, 40, 50% more productive.
Yeah, I can definitely corroborate that point. I think all the smartest, sharpest, like most driven people I know that were born in Canada just don't stay in Canada. They go to the US or they go to a different market because there's more opportunity. I can't blame that only on the government. I think the government is definitely in the way, but there's also just, I think, like the Canadian experiment is very sort of tame, and the VC and finance sector in Canada is, well, so once again, it's very much invaded by the state. So like the state is a big participant in all banking in Canada, including like running VCs. But the VCs that do exist are, small, and they're not, they're very risk averse. They sort of take like a very responsible Canadian approach. So it's just not a good financial market where you can raise, where you can fail, where you can raise again. And that just sort of like drives all entrepreneurship, to places like SF or New York or somewhere else. And, I guess it's a great fumble because it doesn't have to be that way. Like Toronto and Montreal could be powerhouses.
Even for crypto, right? Like this guy from Layer Zero, wasn't he Brian Pellegrini or whatever? Isn't he Canadian? And I know he brought everyone to Canada to work on crypto, and for some reason it didn't work out. And then he moved to the Bahamas and then someplace else. But basically, like he wanted to be able to stay home and work in Canada, but he just couldn't, right? A lot of my favorite Canadians, like Jordan Peterson and Denis Villeneuve, like they all come to the States to work, right? It doesn't seem like it's easy to stay in Canada and keep doing what you're doing, right? So,
and I think during the pandemic, when the Biden administration was like cracking down as hard as they could on crypto, that would have been a great time for Canada to go like, hey, we're not going to do that. We're going to actually attract builders. I mean, you could have had so many builders move to a place like, Toronto is like the most sort of logical one because it's the financial center. Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary also could be okay, but like I think Toronto could have done incredibly well
it's
by
also
attracting just a whole DeFi.
What's that, right?
Yeah. It has some finance. It's got a big airport. It's right next to the border. It's connected to New York, and it's in the Eastern time zone.
It's where Vitalik was when he came up with Ethereum. There's a bunch of Bitcoiners that were there.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
Talk about a fumble. Talk about
of course. Instead, they decided to close the bank accounts of people who didn't like what they were doing.
Yes,
as a government.
Asinine. Well, look,
freeze your assets, and
Before we move on to a different topic, I'll just ask you this one question, which there is an easy way out of this. I'm assigning it a 700% probability of happening, which is Canada could become our 51st state. What do you think are the chances of that?
Well, there's some people in Alberta.
Negative 50%
chance. I've seen some tweets with people posting photos of like the Alberta flag and 51 and the US flag next to it, and like going like Alberta's. There's always been this idea that Alberta could separate. Because Alberta is very unhappy with the rest of Canada. It's more conservative. It has a lot of oil, and some. So I'm not an expert in this market, but I know some experts talk about like the type of oil that they have in Alberta and the type of oil that they have in the US are actually sort of perfect to live together in terms of like refining. They combine really well. It's sort of a perfect union. So if Alberta was part of the US, that would be probably, it would make for a weird map, but it would otherwise be a pretty sort of like natural union.
They would have to successfully seed, they'd have to successfully leave Canada, which I guess theoretically you can do. And then they would have to, ask
we don't really
to join
know,
US.
Right?
It's never going to happen.
The thought is that it's probably possible, but
the problem
it's theoretically possible, but
is,
not practically possible.
Yeah. So the issue with Canada is that people don't like it. It's a little bit has that sort of UK sort of vibe where people don't like to take too strong of a stance on pretty much anything. So you'll get like, the outliers who are in favor of leaving because it's obviously going to be, better for the country in every possible metric, or not the country, but, that state or that province. But people are just like, yeah, but, it's so harsh to like leave the country. Let's just not do that and continue paying taxes.
I think something that people. I completely agree with what Jared just said, and something that people miss about Canada is, if you look at the underlying roots of the country, Canada was formed when Americans stood up to England and said, hey, we're not going to, pay taxes without representation. We're going to fight you. And everyone who didn't want to fight moved to Canada. So Canada was sort of like created as a mid kind of country where, we don't fight and we don't get into conflicts and we just sort of go along to get along. And that's, I think, a lot of what is there. By the way, if Canada did become the 51st state, I think that would be a rough fact for Republicans to deal with and win elections on in the future.
It'd be as big as California and very left.
Yes, you're doubling California.
Yeah, for sure. So a whole bunch of reasons why a lot of the U.S. would not want to allow Canada to join, especially as one big state. One quick thought on Canada. I think it's interesting with the right kind of environment. I feel like it could be maybe the richest per capita country in the world. Like if you look at they are not next to any threatening neighbors. So there's like they're in a very safe place in the world. Per capita, they have probably the best resource situation in the world. They have a ton of timber, and they have a ton of, I think they're the number one place for uranium. They have a ton of oil. They have a lot of ocean,
freshwater, navigable resources, navigable rivers.
You go down the list of all the resources of interest per capita, plus the fact that they're in a very safe place. They're unlikely to be attacked. And so you don't have the existential risk and all those things. Canada could be an insane economic powerhouse per capita. It could be kind of Qatar, that's ultra wealthy per capita because they have so much oil and so few people. So I feel like Canada is in a good, they have a lot of good potential energy, but they need to figure out how to stop driving away entrepreneurs and make it easier to build and do things. And I think there's some policy challenges personally.
Complete lack of drive, from I think the underlying population. It's not a driven bunch.
I'll give my last spicy take on Canada. Is it
the one we're going to have to cut out, or
not necessarily? Really, the only way out of the downward trajectory that Canada is in is an actual civil war, and it will not change otherwise.
Jesus, that is a spicy take. Interestingly, some of my favorite people I've worked with have been Canadians. Yeah,
definitely not my spiciest.
Yeah. I've worked with some really killer Canadians. So it's I also don't think it's the people. I think or maybe it's some people, I don't know, but I think there's some institutional improvements that could take place.
I'm optimistic, man. The veil has been lifted. The left has had this huge propaganda overhang on all of society that's now gone. I don't think they even realize it's gone. So I think I'm very optimistic for the US and also for Canada. So let's see. Hopefully we can navigate it without a fucking civil war. Jesus Christ.
It's interesting. Just a last thought on this. Just the Trump taunting of Canada has been taken very personally in Canada. So I don't think it's bringing people sort of closer to that viewpoint in Canada, if anything. I don't know, Jared, if you have some, I'm not actually there, so I don't know, but Jared, you might actually have some.
Well, I think one of the interesting things to observe is, ever since this tariff situation, it's the first time I've ever actually, Quebec aside, because Quebec already thinks that they're their own country for some delusional reason. But Canada in general, it's the first time that you've ever really seen a show of actual nationalism from within the country. And True. It's for kind of a ridiculous reason, but I'm not necessarily against it because I think Canada could benefit from some, nationalist tendencies in the same way that you see it happening in the States, right? People you don't see people waving the Canadian flag here. It's not really a thing that it just doesn't happen.
By the way, I love how they're uniting around like we're going to completely unallow our citizens to buy certain U.S. products, and people are like, yeah, like no freedom of choice, like that's gone.
Well, you also like you see those videos hovering around Twitter about people taking liquor off the shelves in the liquor stores that are coming from U.S. sources. The thing that I find kind of strange about that is like, yes, let's take the inventory off our shelves that we already paid for and not allow people to purchase it.
Well, I mean, I think what's dark there is that when people probably don't realize this, but in a lot of provinces, you can only buy from the government. The government runs the liquor stores. It's not like the U.S. So when they take it off the shelf and remove, let's say, Jack Daniels from you can no longer buy Jack Daniels. It's no longer allowed in Canada, essentially. So that's what they're doing right now, which is, yeah.
Okay, well, all right. All this is entertaining. It's supposed to be a DeFi/crypto podcast. So let's zoom out of Canada a little bit. Oh, it's interesting to hear you guys' point of view. Okay, we're going on kind of long, so let's just talk briefly about this thing that's going to happen tomorrow. Tomorrow, by the time this podcast comes out, maybe a little bit after, we'll see the headlines for the White House Crypto Summit. The expectations for this crypto summit are, like medium to high. There's a bunch of topics so basically a bunch of leaders are being invited to the White House to talk about crypto, and Trump and his team is like pushing this as like, hey, check it out. This is what we're going to do for crypto. There's some, no one really knows what they're going to talk about, but the guesses are, the three of the main topics that will be discussed is number one, a strategic reserve, which they already announced is going to include Ripple, Sol, and Cardano, I think. And then they later tweeted out that, of course, they would do something for Bitcoin. And I think they said Ethereum as well. I don't think they're going to stop there. They'll probably include some other ones as well. But obviously, if the government, I personally find the idea of a strategic reserve, like the fact that the government's actually going to go buy our bags, to be far-fetched. I didn't think that they would actually go through with that, but maybe they do. That would be great. At least for our bags. I don't know if it's morally the right thing to do, but okay, that's one potential topic. Another one, which is kind of boring, but I think is really important, is getting clarity on what legislation they're actually going to pass regarding crypto. That's going to be the details are obviously going to be really important. So we'll maybe talk about any of the pertinent details that get revealed tomorrow, next week. And then I think the most important one for any U.S. citizens, if you're listening to this pod, is it does seem like they may do some sort of favorable tax treatment for U.S.-based cryptocurrencies. So, essentially eliminating at least federal capital gains tax on U.S.-based cryptocurrencies, which would include things like, I think that includes Ripple, Sol, Cardano, AVAX, and a handful of Move, a handful of other U.S. cryptocurrencies. So anyway, when you guys think about the summit tomorrow, what's the topic that's the most interesting to you? Are there any unknowns that you guys want to take a stab at? Maybe a surprise that you guys think is going to come out? Overall, bullish or bearish for the crypto market? What do you guys think?
I think bullish for the crypto market. I think as far as strategic reserve, the easy way to start building that is when you seize assets from criminals. Maybe just don't sell them off. I think
did you see that tweet today about the government has sold 200,000 Bitcoin, and they generated something like $300 million in revenue from doing that. And if they just held it, they'd be sitting on $17 billion. God, what a miss, right? Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Keep going.
Yeah. They could just hold on to it. Yeah. I think the strategic reserve is obviously for sure going to have Ethereum, Bitcoin, and then the three that were named. But I didn't think that was an exhaustive list. And they have talked about favoring US based. And there's a number of other kind of, let's call it top 30 projects that are US based. So there's Avalanche, there's Polygon. They're both US based. I'm trying to remember which other ones that weren't named on that list. I think you said
if Base introduces a token, or maybe Coinbase. There's some rumors that Coinbase is going to introduce a token. Despite I don't know what the hell you'd use it for, but there are rumors that they're going to introduce a token that would obviously be US based, right?
Linea will have a token, and they're US based. So if we're talking L2s, there's several of them that are US based. And then, I think Sui and Aptos are both US based. So there's a number of L1s and L2s that are some of the larger ones that are based in the US. I think the biggest one that was not named is Avalanche, and I don't think that was an exhaustive list. I think Trump was just throwing out some stuff and saying like, yeah, there's some of these others that'll be on there. And so I think that does encourage teams to start that aren't US based to start trying to think about relocating. And then those that are, it could be a big win for them. Obviously, Bitcoin and Ethereum aren't really based anywhere, I don't think. I mean, Bitcoin definitely isn't. Ethereum, I don't know, the foundation might be Swiss or something. But it's much more, global than a lot of them. So anyway, my biggest prediction is it's not
since Bitcoin was started by the NSA, wouldn't you consider that like sort of the original American asset?
I thought Bitcoin was started by Jack Dorsey. That's the latest rumor.
Come on, really, guy?
So him, NSA, same thing.
Yeah.
He's pretty good. Yeah. So I think so. I guess my biggest prediction is that was not an exhaustive list. It'll be, for sure those named plus ETH and Bitcoin plus I'm guessing like, a handful of others. The thing that I've heard that I'm concerned about is some of the stablecoin legislation that people are talking about. There's rumors that some US-based stablecoin issuers are trying to kind of lock out their foreign competitors. I think that's a bad idea. I think it's bad for the US. I think it's bad for the crypto industry. And I think that my view is if you want to win, compete. Don't get the government to like kill your competitors. So that 100%. One, if some of that comes out, I'll be like very annoyed. So I'm crossing my fingers that does not happen.
I don't have like a super strong view on or like a ton of thoughts on this. I want to see what comes out. I want to see what's in the reserve. I want to see how they select that reserve. The fact that David Sachs is involved sort of gives me a lot of confidence that they might get it right. I like him a lot, even though he's not a crypto expert. I think he sort of has very sound judgment. Like he has a legal background. I think he's able to sort of like, and he understands the tech and he understands, I think, the basic like crypto landscape. Looking forward to seeing the actual subject matter come together.
It's good to see. I think this stuff is probably a good idea to get started on. I do like the idea of like a strategic reserve. And I think like, that combined with more lenient regulation, encouraging actual like crypto businesses is all part of like step one of many towards a post-dollar future where dollars are no longer worth anything, and people just start using, alternative sources of value to trade.
By the way, I've been told that Jared is maybe considering the $5 million golden visa if the crypto taxes sort of like play out correctly.
Yeah, for sure.
Jared at $5 million is a steal, dude. Yeah, let's go. Let's get it. Get Jared over here. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Dude, the one thing I think people are not really talking about. Okay, so maybe I'll just give two thoughts, very quick thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up unless you guys have something else to say. But overall, the macro picture to me feels like people are heavily discounting what Trump is going to do, like for the economy broadly, not crypto. I saw the same thing happen in 2016. At the time I was at a bank trading interest rates, and half of the fund managers that I talked to were basically like, Trump is going to explode the world. So I'm selling, I'm doing the equivalent of selling equity. Most of them were basically just spending a lot of money on equity put options. Okay. And, basically like once he got elected, like the evening of the election, the market tanked a little bit and then it was a straight line up. And basically I think the same thing is playing out now, 8 years later. There's a bunch of people who just think Trump is going to blow up the world with tariffs. And I just think that's unrealistic. Like the guy knows that if tariffs go through and stick around for a long time, it's going to be very negative for the economy. So what he's doing is threatening tariffs to get a good deal, whatever the best deal he can get is. He's going to strike a deal and then the tariffs are going to go away and we're going to go back to tax cuts and deregulation, and equity markets are just going to keep going up. Like that's how I feel about broader risk assets in general. And they're going to provide regulatory clarity with crypto. Hopefully they don't screw that up. But the one thing I think people are really not talking about is this piece, which is that on the bank regulation side, it's going to be much more clear and for traditional financial institutions to house both crypto company assets and also to allow regular funds to own crypto assets on their balance sheet and to lever them up. I think that's the big thing. Like in 2021, the reason why we pumped so hard is basically because a handful of crypto native hedge funds got a bunch of leverage and just thought this super cycle thing was going to happen. And they basically pumped all crypto prices sky high. And those were not traditional asset managers. They, relative to traditional asset managers, they had only a small amount of funds. But now if you allow all traditional asset managers to really participate in the crypto markets and you allow them a significant amount of leverage through this banking system that has, to date, really given them no balance sheet to do that. I mean, my God, I think it's just going to be an absolutely incredible alt season that we just really haven't even seen begin yet. I'm super bullish. So just don't trade on leverage. Stay long. This is my kind of the way I feel. And I don't know that we get all that clarity tomorrow, but I'm definitely going to be looking into the details of what's going to happen with the financial intermediaries that was going to house where the actual risk sits. But anyway, okay. Is there any other topics you guys want to?
I agree with a lot of that. Just one quick thought on that. I do think on the tariff thing, there is one exceptional piece, which is or one exception, which is some of the industries that are of national defense importance are likely to have persistent tariffs. And I think the economic considerations are not front and center. So increasing U.S. manufacturing, especially within certain categories, chips, drones, robots, steel, those things, ships, those things are all pretty critically important to the U.S. And we rely heavily on China for those. So I think tariffs on those things are likely to stick around. And I think probably the idea is we're going to be willing to take an economic hit in those categories in order to make sure that we have the capacity to do those things at home. For the rest, I agree. There's I think it's probably mostly a negotiating tool, and the goal is to actually get the global tariffs to come down. I think that's the point of the reciprocal tariffs, is mostly to try and encourage others to reduce their tariffs, so we actually have more free trade rather than less. That's what I think the goal is. But yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I don't think Trump's team cares where my T-shirt gets made. But yeah, of course, the things that are more important for national security. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. I sort of agree with that take. That I think the tariffs are, you're trying to actually increase free trade overall potentially, but I think with certain big manufacturing countries like China, you're actually trying to cut that out and redevelop manufacturing in the U.S. for national security reasons. Obviously the U.S. can't fight a war if it can't manufacture, and right now it probably can't. So that is, I think, pretty scary. And I think it's sort of too theoretical for maybe other presidents to care about. But I think Trump actually sort of sees that whole aspect of actual power is really what helps me negotiate. And we don't have it. The U.S. doesn't have the cards when it comes to fighting certain styles of wars with certain other global players right now. And I think having that card is probably important long term. So I would think that's sort of the play. So yeah.
That's what I said last time. That's what happens when you send all your manufacturing out of your own country.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Let's end it there. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you all next week. Have a great week. See ya.
Bye.